Smiley, happy Chinese children. Thank you, Lee. We're going to do some readings from biography. Biography. Who gets to tell the story of another person's life? What do they have to work with? Should they apologize to their subject and to us for everything they will omit or misinterpret? Should we ever forgive them? Or should we just go and check their Wikipedia page? I'm going to start with a short story. According to Wikipedia, in 1991, Paula Krantz was our high school valedictorian, homecoming queen, and an all-state basketball player in Bismarck, North Dakota. January 12th, now Mrs. Paula Broadwell, a military officer and a counterterrorism specialist, she published All In, The Education of General David Petraeus, a lauded biography of the four-star general and former commander of the United States military in Iraq and Afghanistan. 10 months later, news broke that Broadwell had been Petraeus' lover. Adultery is a crime under U.S. military code. And following the revelations, on November 9th, 2012, Petraeus resigned from his post as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. The Paramours had first met in 2006, following a speech by Petraeus at Harvard University. He helped her with her dissertation, a study of his own career and his own counterinsurgency tactics, which would later become the subject of the biography on him. In a 2012 interview, Broadwell recounted how, as her and David's, quote, rapport increased, he decided to make it more of an relationship, if you will, and started treating me like his biographer. They conducted interviews together while jogging. To communicate, they shared a Gmail account. They would write letters to one another, save them as drafts, and delete them after they had been read. She affectionately called him Dangerous Dave, or Peaches. While it is not known exactly when their romance started, CNN described their affair as a lot more than sex. There might have been pillow talk about national secrets. They could even have been in love. Who's to say? Just after Broadwell's biography of Petraeus came out, she preemptively insisted on her objectivity, claiming, "It's not a hagiography. I'm not in love with David Petraeus, but I do think he presents a terrific role model for young people, for executives, for men, and for women." We may never know whether or not she considered this extramarital affair a component of, or an exception to, his exemplary life. Biographers develop, quite rightly, a complicated relationship to their subject. Most come to know of them only through the memories of friends and family, written correspondences and documents. A few know the person in real life, while even fewer, statistically speaking, have sex with their subjects. Nonetheless, intimacy comes with empathy, or vice versa. Judgment comes with intimacy, as well as with the task itself. As the authors in this book reveal, in our fascinations with others' lives, we cannot stop ourselves from putting information out there about other people, enhanced, distorted, false, or some complex combination. The stories in biography are about writing and reading about other people's lives, about personalities, reputations, and deeds, about thoughts and dreams, about their problems, which in turn are also ours. So our first reader, Kate Sutton, will begin.
So I'm reading an excerpt from Victoria Cambland's article, Mohammed Kurban Lev Ased Nusimbam Saeed Bey, The Crude Subject. In October 1999, the New Yorker magazine published an article by Tom Rees called The Man from the East. The piece addressed the puzzling and unknown authorship of the novel Ali and Nino, a blood, feud, and scandal-soaked love story between an aristocratic Muslim boy and a Georgian Christian princess, set in and around Baku before the World War I. Written by pseudonymous Kurban Said, the work was a German-language bestseller when it first appeared in Vienna in 1937, and would later be canonized as a national classic in Azerbaijan. Rees was reporting from the Azeri capital when he was struck by the impressive degree to which the anonymous fiction informed Baku's post-Soviet cultural identity. The New Yorker article he subsequently devoted to the topic was seductive enough to inspire an English-language reprint of the Caucasian romantic epic by Random House in 2000, its first since the early 1970s. And Rees was riveted enough by Ali and Nino's origins to devote the next 5 years to their study. That endeavor culminated culminated in Rees's book, The Orientalist, Solving the Mystery of a Strange and Dangerous Life, published in 2005. Reflecting back on the scope of his task, Rees wrote in the introduction that, quote, all anyone agreed on was that Kurban Said was the pen name of a writer who had probably come from Baku, an oil city in the Caucasus, and that he was either a nationalist poet who was killed in the gulags, or the dilettante son of an oil millionaire, or a Viennese cafe society writer who died in Italy after stabbing himself in the foot. A literary forensic trail of press clippings, interviews, and memoirs led Rees from Kurban Said to Lev Nussbaum, born 1905, died 1942, a mysterious and chameleonic personage who, as a Jewish boy from Baku who converted to Islam while in exile in Berlin, adopted the name Assad Bey and became famous in interwar Europe and the United States for his savvy, Eastern aristocratic persona and the best-selling biographies of Stalin and the Tsar, at once fit all and none of these descriptions. The Orientalist nevertheless argues that Nussbaum was the definitive author of Ali and Nino, something that has been rumored but never proven per se, and the book functions as his only comprehensive biography. Yet despite the apparent breadth, depth, and singularity of Rees's investigation, the true identity of the Sphinx-like Said continues to elude consensus. So do the details of the Nussbaum Bey story with which Said's is supposedly entwined. With a shapeshifter as its subject, the Orientalist proposes a volatile biographical paradigm, an account of the unaccountable, or a physical grasp of the soluble. It is accepted that Nussbaum was born to Jewish parents and raised amid the oil-rich extravagance of turn-of-the-century Baku. Crude was so abundant there that it coated the ripples of the Caspian, such that one could set the sea alight. Pre-Soviet Bakuvians of all creeds luxuriated in its glow in mosques, synagogues, cathedrals, and casinos that seemed to emerge organic and polydocs from bottomless black springs. The Orientalist's earliest photograph of Lev shows him among a group of festively dressed children attending a Muslim-Jewish Christmas party in 1913. This was a diaspora capital so prosperous that it could make perceived opposites, fire and water, east and west, cohere. Rees credits the resultant emulsion with what would prove to be Nussbaum's innately elastic relationship to the truth. Quote, Lev grew up in a tradition of hoary eyewitness accounts and miraculous sightings. He was from a land, after all, where the ground burst spontaneously into flame, end quote.
I'm going to read the disclaimer of James Westcott's Sorry I'm Daring to Write Your Biography, The Art of the Disclaimer. There sits the biography, a nice weight in the hand, firm but with a tiny heat of cushioning in its numberless pages, reassuringly bound, preferably hardback, probably unread. The biography exudes impossible authority, a life's work often, spent on someone else's life, and triggers in the reader a thrilling intimidation. Am I up to this? The reader is free to give up almost immediately, though, because there's always the preface. Usually the preface tells you not exactly all you need to know, but more than enough to extrapolate a larger picture. You glean from it the style and perspective of the biographer, unless her preface acts as a crafty piece of bait, rather than an overture. It often skips straight to the subject's death, or narrates a breakthrough moment in their life, when things were just about to turn in their favor, when they were starting to realize their ability in the real world, not just in their heads, or when they're in the middle of a crisis or a failure that later, we all know but not admit at this point, makes perfect historical and psychological sense. The best thing about prefaces, though, is that they often contain a very beautiful and complex disclaimer or apology, and especially if the biography is written before the 20th century, written in florid, multi-clause English. I usually pick up biographies just to read these declarations of fear and inadequacy in the face of their subject, who is A, just so much better than the biographer in every way, and who B, they must now somehow encompass, master, honor, and critique in order not to write pure panegyric, and C, who they usually had a very intimate relationship, which makes the whole endeavor already nearly impossible, even more fraught. Faced with the task of biography, outright terror seems a very correct response. Biography is a genre that must apologize for itself. There are several hallmarks of the classic disclaimer. The biographer must apologize in advance to the reader and to the subject alike for the brazenness of what he has attempted. He might also apologize not only for his own failings, but for the inherent limitations of the medium itself. At the same time, disclaimers are by definition an excuse to carry on regardless with what you always planned to do. The biographer must subtly establish his excellent credentials and justify his audacity. Disclaimers are moments of intimacy, collusion and confession, throwing into relief the secret triangle of reader, biography, subject. They clear the air between the parties, removing doubts and suspicions, venting insecurities. It's the hurried completion of the mise en scène, with the audience taking their seats before the performance of writing can begin. What follows are simply a few of the best disclaimers I know of, and also one of my own, chronologically presented and humbly annotated. If some are too long, forgive me. It's only an attempt to give the fantastic style of these authors the proper breathing space. And if the chronology of these examples makes everything seem teleological, like we're on an inevitable path of progress and improvement, this is how we became modern, then I'm also sorry. It's not my intention at all. But confronting inescapable chronology without imposing a portentous tone or a sense of inevitability is one of the dilemmas of biography itself. And finally, if I've missed some of the better examples of disclaimers throughout the history of biography, it's due to a fundamental ignorance and a lack of space that I hope the reader will forgive me for, and which this collection, as far as I know, like nothing ever before assembled, is an attempt to combat.
I'm reading from Douglas Copeland's essay on how he became an accidental biographer for Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist. And it's in the first person, so I have to do Doug justice. Being a first-time biographer, my strategy in beginning to read about McLuhan's life was to enter McLuhan's mind and body and find something, anything, that the two of us had in common and build from there. This might have been difficult were I writing about Joseph Goebbels, Susan B. Anthony, or Aung San Suu Kyi. I'm sorry I mispronounced that. But with Marshall McLuhan, I hit the jackpot. First, his family's ancestral history and immigration experience was a direct copy in time and space of that of my own family. Bible-thumping Scotch-Irish, transversing the 19th and 20th century Canadian Maritimes and prairies. McLuhan even lived down the street from my mother in Winnipeg. They attended the same high school. I suppose this overlap is a benefit of me being a living Canadian writing about a dead Canadian. Second, McLuhan's medical eccentricities and tics in some way mirrored many of my own, sometimes to a level that was spooky, particularly when one approaches the lower end of the autistic spectrum, that magic line where personality becomes pathology. This second overlap very much helped me to bond with someone who was, by any description, very hard to bond with. Remember, McLuhan's ship came in when he was 50 years old. He was a crusty, highly Catholic fuddy-duddy teacher of Middle English at the University of Toronto. He had many of the uncomfortable prejudices of his era. Just think of your parents ranting about whatever at the Thanksgiving dinner table. He would discuss his ideas almost anywhere or any time, but he never even discussed his beliefs or his fears or his sense of himself. Not that one needs to do that, but it certainly makes it harder to open the gate. I got the impression that if I met McLuhan at a dinner party, he'd be fascinating for the first 10 minutes and then highly annoying for the next 180. And the only way to get through those minutes would be to perform a sort of psychiatric armchair analysis along the lines of, what the heck is going on inside this guy? For example, why is he always punning? McLuhan loved puns, but punning is actually shown to be a wiring glitch in regions of the brain where ideas are turned into words that are then turned into sounds that are then spoken by the mouth. Oddly, McLuhan's only million seller was a highly art-directed musing on his ideas by a graphic designer, Quentin Fiore. McLuhan provided only the title, "The medium is the massage." McLuhan had many wiring glitches. Everyone does. There is no normal. But there are standard deviances. This is undeniable. With almost scientific clarity, we can say that McLuhan had a low to medium grade case of Asperger's syndrome. While he was very social as a bombast, his interaction skills were poor. His classes were filled with tripping hippies whom he loathed, and who looked at McLuhan in much the same spirit as current students might view a payload of Mentos being dropped into a liter-sized bottle of Diet Coke. The thing is, whether in a classroom or at a dinner table, McLuhan was pretty much a one-way leaf blower of ideas and theories. He also suffered from hyperacuity, extreme sensitivity to noise. He was an astonishing mimic, a skill he inherited from his mother, and a skill related to hypervascularization of certain portions of the brain. This is where it gets almost science fiction. McLuhan had a third artery in his head that ran through his brain's left lobe, a vascular feature only ever seen among mammals in cats. It was discovered when he had a lemon-sized brain tumor in 1968. McLuhan also had pronounced memory skills, a condition that occurs when factual information is stored in the portion of the brain otherwise used for wayfinding and directionality. For people who remember pi to 10,000 digits, they're not telling you a numerical sequence. In their minds, they're simply giving you driving instructions. And finally, McLuhan possessed a sense of what some members of the psychiatric community call Christmas morning syndrome, the perpetual enviable sense that one is in the midst of a holy or numinous situation, something most people experience a few times in their lives. McLuhan lived it 24/7. He was a daily attender of Mass and put up with the late 20th century only because upon death he would be able to escape it.
Thank you very much to all of our readers. And just a reminder that the biography books are available in the forum. Thank you.